Hey everyone, we're here at Korg with the Volca Modular, which is a modular synth in the Volca line that adds sequencing features that have never been seen before on a Korg Volca synth. So Volca Modular has some of the features that have appeared on past Korg Volca synths, like a touchpad keybed, step recording, live recording, active step where you can take steps out and bring them back in, and of course, motion sequencing, where you can record knob motion over the course of a sequence and have it play back. But Volca Modular adds a new randomize note and randomize active step button to the normal Volca sequencer. So if I have a sequence running, for example this, which I've just programmed in, I can play that and then hit randomize note, and Volca Modular will randomize the notes in my sequence, adding a new performability aspect. And I can also do that with randomizing the active step on Volca Modular's sequencer. So in addition to new sequencing features which are reminiscent of classic West Coast sequencing techniques and are new to the Volca sequencer format, Volca Modular also contains new tuning features which haven't appeared on past Volcas. And those include, for example, different modes like Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, etc., or pentatonic scales, and then you have microtonal scales which can be used to create notes and tunings that are outside the realm of normal 12-tone chromatic scales. If I press the function key and then hit scale, which is step button number 1, I can play my sequence and then select a different scale, and Volca Modular will transpose my sequence into that scale. I can also change the tonic, for example, by pressing function, tonic, and then pressing one of the 12 lit up step buttons which represent the 12 tones in the normal chromatic scale. If I want to create a custom microtuning setup, I can edit the microtuning by holding function and using the space out knob to control the microtuning of each individual note in a custom microtonal setting scale. So in addition to adding new controls for randomization of sequences, Volca Modular also adds 2 new sequencer modes. So let's start by recording a simple sequence in step by step. I'm in major pentatonic. And I can step record by pressing function and then the record button. These will flash, and now I'm in step record mode, and I can play one note at a time to create a sequence from scratch. So now that I have that sequence, I can do things like randomize the active step or the notes involved, but I can also change the sequencer mode to something like bounce, for example, which instead of playing all 16 notes linearly start to finish, the sequencer will play all 16 notes and then play them in reverse and bounce back and forth across the length of the sequencer while I have the sequencer enabled. And if I add in or subtract active steps while that's running, I can get a really cool, interesting polyrhythmic or atypically rhythmic result. There's also another mode called stochastic sequencer, and stochastic sequencer incorporates a bit of randomness into sequencing. So when the stochastic sequencer is enabled, at each step the next step will be decided randomly from 4 choices: 1 forward, skip 1 forward, 1 backwards, or to repeat the same step. And that's decided randomly. So enabling the stochastic sequencer is a way to get evolving and original sequences out of something that you've already written. So let's engage that and press play. So to control the speed of that sequencer on volca modular, you have what's called a clock. And each volca that's come out so far has had a clock. Volca modular is the first volca with a modulatable clock. And you do this by using the modulation input on the clock section. And the modulation input on the clock section can modulate plus or minus 20 BPM from the position that the clock knob is set. So let's demonstrate that by using a looping envelope like we used before. I've set function 2 to loop by connecting the end of cycle trigger output to the beginning of cycle trigger input, and now I'm going to take the positive modulation output of function 2 and connect it to the clock modulator. So that's an example of how you can get not only evolving sequences, but evolving rhythms and different tempos that modulate themselves as part of your performance. The clock section also has outputs, and on the right side, those are a gate and a pitch output from the actual sequencer on board volca modular, which you can send to any of the modulation inputs. And there's also 3 clock divider outputs, which can be used to generate polyrhythms, because each of these clock dividers fires off at a certain division of the internal sequencer on volca modular. So for example, I'm going to connect the divided by 3 clock divider output to the trigger of function 2. And what that's going to do is trigger function 2 to fire off every 3rd note that's played by the sequencer. And then I can route that trigger information pretty much anywhere. But I'm going to route it towards the wave folder so we can really hear what's going on with that kind of polyrhythmic function. So that's the sequencer and tuning functions of volca modular. And that ends our how-to series. But remember, there's always new patches to try, and there's always new signal paths, and there are no wrong answers. So keep trying new things, and you might come out with something cool and unexpected. Enjoy volca modular.